And so after my baptism, Father Paul said, "So what do you plan to do now that you are truly baptized and Orthodox Christian?" I said, "Well, I've always thought about going to Mount Athos and exploring the monastic life." And he said, "Well, we have a monastery in Astoria, Queens, and we invite you there." And so I went to, well, first he says, I told him yes, I would be interested. He says, when do you want to come? I said, right now, the very day of my baptism. He says, right now, really? I said, yeah, right now, let's go. So he says, okay, I'll buy you a ticket. And the very day of my baptism, I flew to New York and ended up at St. Marcellus. I started to study my mother's heritage, the Basque heritage, and I was done with school very young because I was going to be a Catholic priest. That was the hope of my mother and at the time my hope. And so completing high school very young, I was able to enter university very young. And in so doing, at the time, I thought I would be a landscape architect. The neighborhood that I grew up here in Chicago was Humboldt Park, and I had studied the founder of Humboldt Park, William LeBaron Jens Jensen, under landscape architecture. And I said, I'm going to become the next great landscape architect and resurrect the beauty that once was Humboldt Park. So I went to study at Champaign-Urbana, and then I discovered I had to do a lot of math, and I'm allergic to math. So I said, no, I don't want to do this. I already left the landscape architecture. I moved to study international politics, diplomacy, went to Reno, Nevada University, and this is where my Orthodox experience begins. Now, the point for me was that I didn't want anything to do with my dad because I felt he didn't want anything to do with me. And I remember as a 10-year-old boy, my dad was in a helicopter driving. My mother and my siblings, the 5 of us, were in this helicopter. This, of course, was a dream. And the dashboard was saying, too heavy, too heavy, too heavy. The helicopter is crashing. And so they're throwing everything out of the helicopter into the ocean, but it's still saying too heavy. He grabs me and he throws me into the ocean. I cannot swim, and I wake up from this dream. Up to my conversion to Orthodoxy, I wanted nothing to do with my dad, but my sisters had converted to Protestant religion. My mother had remained a Roman Catholic. Myself, I was searching for the truth and finding 2 arguments, either Protestant or Roman Catholic, to both be somewhat incorrect. My brothers became indifferent about religion until my older brother began to convert to Orthodoxy, much after myself and my mother. So now, ignoring the themes of my dad, I studied Basque, culture and language at the University of Reno, and then I saw an advertisement that said Greek Festival of Reno, Nevada. And I said, Greeks in Reno? And I went to the one and only church of the Greek Archdiocese, St. Anthony's Parish of Reno, Nevada. George Bratiotis was the priest of St. Anthony's. I went to the festival. He says, you're part Greek. You should come to the Greek church. I said, but my mother is not Greek. She's Roman Catholic. I go to the Catholic church, not to the Orthodox church. He says, well, why don't you come this one late Saturday evening? Our service will begin about 11:30, and then we'll have a great dinner afterwards about 3 a.m. It will be really a beautiful service. I think you would love it. And I said, I'll go. And I did. And that was Pascha. Now, this was the day and the hour and the moment that I converted to Orthodoxy. Witnessing Pascha, the foundation of it was my mother, and something that occurred to me when I was 7 years old. My grandmother died. My first pet, a white hamster, died, Snowball. And I was pretty devastated as a young child because I already felt the loss of my dad and the loss of now my grandmother and my pet hamster. And I prayed as a young boy of 7, God, give me something to love, something that I will not lose like I've lost my beloved pet Snowball. And so that time I said to my mother, 7 years old, I'm going to fast for my hamster. I don't want to eat or drink anything for 3 days. My mother said, what? I said, yes. We see it in the lives of the saints. I want to do this. Let me do this. And my mom said, I'll let you try, but if I see you're weak and you're sick or you're hurting yourself, I'm going to make you eat something. I said, just let me try then. And she did, and I didn't complain at all, and I succeeded to fast 3 days. The night of my third day of fasting, I had what I believe to be a great miracle, an apparition, where Michael the Archangel appears. What I recall, I was kneeling, as I did at that time, on my bed, and the entire room disappeared. The only thing I saw was the Archangel. He was of giant proportion. And he says to me, if you want something to love, love Christ, serve his church, and you'll never lose his love. And that's what I recall having occurred. Now, when this vision ended, there was a beautiful smell that my mother immediately recognized, and my sisters and brothers came to ask about. And the neighbors came and asked, where is this smell coming from? And I told my mom what it was. It's at this time that she has me speak to the priest, the Catholic priest, who in turn says, we have a school for boys that will become priests. You will be in an intensive school program until you become a student in the Vatican as a Catholic priest. And so this is the program that I would join with the Catholic Church. However, the very first Mass as a student in this school was for me to be an altar boy. We get dressed in the vestibule. We all go and we're all sitting down in front of all the parishioners. And a bell rings and people all stand up and the Mass begins. Well, when that bell rang and I stood up, I fainted right to the floor. And the next thing I know, I'm in the vestibule where they had carried me, and I'm waking up, and I hear what I knew to be the voice of Michael the Archangel saying, don't serve here. Do not serve here. Don't serve here. 3 times. And I was very confused. I was, again, 7 years old. What do you mean, don't serve here? And so I put everything in the back burner. So when I was at St. Anthony's Parish, the first words that I told Father Anthony after the Pascha service was, I want to be an Orthodox priest. He says, you have to become an Orthodox first. And I said, okay. And so he began to teach me, but my schooling was ending, and I was soon to have to return to Chicago. So he says, well, my classmate was Father Dean Botzis. He has a beautiful parish in Chicago, St. Haralambos. Go there. And I said, okay, I will. So I was a student here in this high school here in Chicago, and I met my future New Calendar godmother, Evgenia Kralis, here. And she had us do a school project where we had to gather all the family names in our family history as we could. I discovered names that I showed to my future godmother, and she said, those are all Greek names, and on my dad's side. And so this was the very first time that I had a personal connection between me and anything Greek. Mind you, at the time I didn't want anything to do with my dad and anything of him. But it's because of learning these names that one, I took my grandmother's last name from my name, changing it from my dad's immediate last name because I wanted to disassociate with him. From here, she would tell me, you know, you should know more about the Greek culture, the Greek religion, the Greek history. And so with Eugenia's help, I began to learn what is Greek and what is Greek Orthodox. So when I did the family history and family research and began to reveal the names of my ancestors that were very clearly Greek names, she wanted me, Eugenia, my future godmother, to get excited about what it meant to be of Greek origin. And she invited me to her daughter's wedding here at St. Haralambos Church. And it was an ironic coincidence that the one who told me that I was of Greek origin and the priest that I met when I was studying my mother's Basque heritage both pointed me to St. Haralambos Church. They didn't know each other, but they both said, come to St. Haralambo. And so I ended up coming here, meeting Father Dean Botzis, who began teaching me Orthodoxy in preparation for my baptism in the New Calendar Church. I began to prepare and get ready, and eventually on the New Calendar feast of Taxiarchon, because the church has a double saint historically. It was Taxiarchon and St. Haralambo, and my name at that time was Michalis. I was to be baptized in the Greek Archdiocese New Calendar Church on the feast of Taxiarchon. I come ready for my baptism, and Father Dean says, no, you're not getting baptized. You're a Roman Catholic. You don't have to be baptized. We accept and recognize Catholic baptism as valid, and so we're not going to baptize you. And I said, I want to be baptized. I don't want to not be baptized. Baptism is by triple immersion, and the Catholics don't immerse at all. They asperse you. And I said, I want to be baptized. He says, no, tonight we're only going to do chrismation, and then we'll give you communion, but no baptism. But if you want, one day you can visit Mount Athos, and maybe they'll baptize you there. But we don't baptize converts from the Catholic Church into the Orthodox Church. We only chrismate them. And so I was very disappointed. I was very upset, but I had to be obedient, and I was chrismated into the New Calendar Church here at St. Haralambos, and then received Holy Communion and would continue my religious life as a New Calendarist here at St. Haralambos. I was every day here helping. I was working as the assistant to do anything they needed me to do every single day. I became in love with this community. This was my number one focus. Anytime I was out of school, I was here. And I would end up finding it very hard to leave St. Haralambos Parish. I want to introduce one more miracle that happened to me, and it's demonstrated by the icon of St. Haralambos. When you see his face, you can tell it's St. Haralambos. He's very distinct looking. When I eventually got baptized in the Old Calendar Church, they put a white t-shirt over me after my baptism, and the oil of baptism, was on this t-shirt. And I would keep this t-shirt as a relic of my baptism until I went to Jordanville to be a novice and a seminarian. One day, one of the monks there came into my kelia to borrow a book that he knew I had, and he immediately said, because the t-shirt was standing on a hanger there on the wall, and he says, look at that t-shirt and look at the icon of St. Haralambos. They're identical. The image of St. Haralambos had printed itself with the mirror of baptism onto my t-shirt, and there was no doubt in it. It was so very distinct, very clear. The bishop came to my room and he saw it, and he says, can I have this t-shirt? This is something that you shouldn't actually keep. And so he took it and he had it, and unfortunately Lavra would end up with the Moscow Patriarchate, and I would never see that t-shirt again. But St. Haralambos appeared in my t-shirt of baptism with his clear iconographic image printed on that t-shirt. Well, I had been originally a New Calendarist, and I started asking my New Calendar priest if I can visit the other parishes with his blessing, and he did give me the blessing, and I would visit all the different Orthodox parishes that I can travel to. I was a young man, and I decided that I would go for the feast day of St. Nikolas, since my last name is Nikolas, and I wanted to go to the Albanian St. Nicholas Church. And this was 1986, so I would have been 21 years old, and I came. It was Vespers, and as we began Vespers, I noticed some kind of movement on the icon of the Mother of God. This is where I was when it started to cry, and I could see something moving. Right. Yes. And I said, what is this? What's happening? And so I purposely went all the way around. I decided to go around because I wasn't sure of what I was seeing. And I came up here, and I stood right here, and I said, look, the Mother of God is crying. This is the moment that people all look to see what's happening. Father Kupus came out, he saw, and he said, the sign of the cross. And that was the beginning of everyone's realization that the Mother of God indeed was crying. And many people would come from all over the country, thousands of people. There was a continuous line, traffic, from outside the church, a very heavy line of people coming every day to come up here, venerate the Mother of God, kiss her icon, then exit, and some would stay and pray, and others would just leave, and miracles happened. I know of a few that, resulted from the Mother of God's miraculous icon, and it was a very great moment for Chicago. She's truly the icon of Chicago.
Yes.
Every city has a miracle icon that is historical to Orthodoxy. This is one of the oldest Orthodox cities and the largest of the Orthodox cities. This is the Queen of Chicago. This is the Mother of God of Chicago. Prior to this, there was a lot of frustrations that I was having with regards to what the New Calendarist clergy were doing. Particularly, I was frustrated with festivals that included Fridays in which even clergymen were eating meat. Beside this, I, having converted originally from Catholicism to Orthodoxy, was frustrated that I was seeing this approachment of Orthodoxy to Catholicism. So this combined with the lax attitude towards the traditions of the church really frustrated me. And so what I was really doing by going to the other churches was trying to find a more faithful Orthodox community that I would be happier attending than what was becoming more and more a frustrating situation for me, where I was seeing the breaches against Orthodoxy and the patristic traditions. So I came and I saw this miracle, and I strongly believe I was the one who first noticed the miracle of the Mother of God crying. The official story says the priest was, but I remember very strongly I was the one who first screamed out, "Look, the Mother of God is crying." So it happened that the icon's miracle of its tears drew many, many people from around Chicago, Illinois, and the entire nation. Amongst the people who would eventually come would be my future spiritual father, Father Paul at that time, who would become Metropolitan Pavlos of Astoria All America, and also Bishop Petros, the then sitting hierarch of the Greek Genuine Orthodox Church of America. They came through these doors, and I happened to be the person standing at the door, giving everyone direction, how to enter, how to proceed, how to venerate the icon, and then how to either sit and pray or to exit the church. And this is what was a daily ritual for me. Every day from the day it began to cry, I was at that door of this church directing people to come and venerate the Most Holy Mother of God. And then suddenly I saw men that were dressed as I understood only monks would dress. But this was Chicago, and I knew there was no monastery in Chicago or in the metropolitan area at the time. So my initial question to them when they walked in was, "You guys from Mount Athos?" And they said, "No, we're from here in Chicago." I said, "Here in Chicago? And you dress like this?" And they said, "Yes, we're genuine Orthodox." I said, "Genuine Orthodox, what is that?" And they said, "We are the Traditionalist Orthodox Church of America. We are here in Chicago. We have a church on the south side." I said, "Where? Where in Chicago are priests dressed like this?" And one of their party, my future godfather, Nikolas, gave me his business card and said, "Come to my business. It's next to Agua Triada, and I'll explain more to you." And so they venerated and then departed. So at St. Haralambos Parish, I would involve myself with the most pious people of the parish, and they had put a lot of confidence in one particular person, Father Ephraim of Philotheo Monastery in Montathos, and he was trying to begin monasteries in North America, and they were very convinced of his sanctity. I had already studied much theology, that I knew that a person who has that true representation of sanctity would speak against the heresies and the problems that I was very bothered with. Why are we trying to join with the Roman Catholic Church? Why are they trying to make this approachment to the Catholic Church, which is what I left to become a Orthodox Christian? Why are they doing this? And so, since he was being held as the expert of Orthodoxy at the time, I said, well, then I'll ask him. And my future godfather of the traditional Orthodox Church, whose business was right across the church from Holy Trinity Parish in Chicago, Nikolas, gave me a paper that had all of the blasphemies, all of the heresies that the patriarch was known to be preaching, when he said it, what he said, and in what context he had said it. And it was in English and in Greek. I said, well, I'm going to take this to Holy Trinity Parish, the oldest parish of Chicago, and then share it with everyone in the parish visiting this Father Ephraim. I came and I passed out these papers, and Father George here at Holy Trinity Parish and the proedros of the parish came up to me and said, why are you passing this paper out? And I said, because I want to know why we are trying to unite with the Catholic Church. What's going on with this approachment to Catholicism? We are supposed to be Orthodox. And he says, what church are you from? And I said, I'm from St. Haralambos Parish. He says, you're from St. Haralambos and you're passing this out? And I said, yes. He says, well, stop doing it and do not pass this out anymore. Come to, go home and don't pass this out. So I had fortunately met Father Ephraim just before that. And I had my chance to speak to him and ask him the same question. Why are we trying to unite with the Catholic Church and Protestant religions? And so they had me go downstairs and speak to Father Ephraim. And in asking him, his answer was only one. I can't tell you nothing, but never deny that there's grace in the New Calendar Church. I said, Pate, the saints always spoke against heresy. Why don't you give me an answer? He says, I cannot. And that was it. So after I came upstairs, that's when I was told to leave by Father George Kaludis. And I did. And the very next day was Vespers at St. Haralambos Church. And that's when Father Dean sees me and says, I want to talk to you right after Vespers. And so right after Vespers, I would see him. He tells me, come right into the Yero. And he had me sit right before the Agia Trapeza. He's sitting right at the Holy of Holies. We're both inside the altar. We're facing each other as in confession. It wasn't a confession, but as if we were in confession. And he says, why were you passing this paper out at Agia Triada? And I said, because I want to know why we are making these approachments to Catholicism. And I said, they're not a church. It's not a true Christian church, and we shouldn't be doing this. And he says, who says they're not a true Christian church? Who says they don't have grace? Who says they don't have mysteries? They have true priests. They have true mysteries. And I said, St. Cosmas Oitolos says they're not a church, that they don't have grace. St. Photios the Great, St. Gregory Palamas, many saints have said it. And he says, Father Dean Botsis in St. Haralambos says to me, those were all fanatic saints. And I said, oh, really? I said, well, then I need to leave. Thank you, and I gotta go. And I left, and I never returned until today. So after that experience, I went right there to my godfather. I went right there to Nikolas' business, and I began to, I told him I want to go back to St. Anagari. Now, I had been to St. Anagari because Father Dean says, you can go, but do not take anything from them, not even Andidra, not, nothing. Don't take any literature, don't take nothing from them. I said, well, I want to go. And so he let me go, and I went, but I was paranoid. I said, oh my, I can't, take anything from these old calendars. They're not really Orthodox. Now remember, this same priest who says that the old calendar is not Orthodox is the same one telling me that the Catholic Church is full of grace, is a true church, has sacraments, is valid inside of the Yero at St. Haralambo. But now he's telling me, don't go to the old calendar. They're not Orthodox. They don't have mysteries. They don't have nothing. So after he blasphemes the saints, I knew I needed to go back to Nico. I went to his business right over here, and I said, I want to be old calendar. He says, good. We're going to have a great service. In fact, tonight, it was the feast of Cosmas and Damianos. And I went, and lo and behold, those monks that I saw at St. Nikolas Church are now serving at St. Anagari. That was Bishop Petros, Father Nectarios, Father Pavlos, Father Komianos, the future Father Cristo. And they were all there, and they introduced me, and they heard my story, and they said, so you want to become truly Orthodox? I said, yes. I said, I want to get baptized. And they said, okay, well then we can baptize you next week. And so I said, fantastic. They said, we're going to do the second feast of the church, which is Saint Nectarios, and we'll get you baptized. I'm going to return, and I, Bishop Pablo, today, at that time, Father Pablo, would come and baptize me. And so at St. Anagari Church, I would arrive to be baptized, and it is there at St. Anagari that finally, after 7 years as a new calendarist, I was given the great blessing of being baptized a genuine Orthodox Christian. Father Pablo will baptize me in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and in the Holy Spirit, TIMOTHEOS. Until that minute that the name came out, TIMOTHEOS, I had no idea whatsoever that I, Michalis, would now become Timothy. So I was baptized at St. Anagari, and unbeknown to me, I would become Timothy. And I remember saying to Bishop Paul, I think Michael the Archangel is going to be offended that I'm giving up his name. And he says, no, I think he will be pleased and happy that you are becoming a Timotheos. And I will be your Paul, you will be my Timotheos. And so I was baptized with the name of the apostle, and Bishop Paul would become my spiritual father. And immediately after my baptism, he asked me the question, what do you want to do now? And I said, well, I've been thinking about going to Mount Athos. And he says, well, we have a monastery in Astoria, New York. Why don't you come with us and become a brother of the monastery there, become a dokimos? And I said, okay, I'm fine with that. And he says, when would you like to come? I said, right now. And so the very day of my baptism, we fly to New York City, and I arrive in Astoria, Queens, New York, at the double-named church and monastery of St. Marcellas and St. Anna's. And this is the Brotherhood of St. Anna's, and named after the brotherhood that the bishop himself, Petros Astifides, had come from in Chios and Montathos, the brotherhood of Saint Anna. And so they had a little church of Saint Anna right next to Saint Marcello's, and my room was in the very back of Saint Anna's Michelio, and that's where I would stay. I want to say it was 2 years before they told me, we want you to go and learn Russian and get your degree in theology at Jordanville, New York, at that time Rokor, not with Moscow. When I arrived in Jordanville, I was to be a novice still and a seminarian, and I completed my studies in Jordanville and began to consider becoming a monk. At the same time, my mother became very ill with diabetes, and they told me that my mother was dying and that I had to hurry and get to Chicago. And so I got a blessing to leave Jordanville. I flew to Chicago, and that very day that I arrived, without reason except God, my mother suddenly became well and would be released from the hospital. But she was still admitted into the hospital, still not released when I arrived. And there was, it was a Catholic hospital, and there was a nun that came, and she was not dressed in a habit. Instead, she was dressed in a blouse and pants. And she saw me dressed in the novice habit, and she says, "Oh, you must be old Catholic." And I said, "No, I'm Eastern Orthodox Christian." And she said, "Well, it's about the same like us, pretty much the same thing." And I said, "No, it's quite different." She said, "Really? How so?" And I began to teach her the heresies of Catholicism, and she became nervous and started shaking. And she said, "I just want to know if anyone wants communion from me." And my mom said, "I do." And she says, "You want communion from me?" And my mom said, "Yeah, I want communion." So she says, "Okay, say the Our Father." And my mother is saying the Our Father while she starts going through her, the nun, starts going through her pants pocket, and she's looking for something, and she takes something out of her pocket, opens it up, and gives my mother what they were calling Holy Communion. And then she leaves. And I said to my mom, "Mom, will you please think for a minute, just think. In the Old Testament, the holiest thing on earth was the holiest of holies and the tabernacle. And a priest could only enter one time a year. He could not enter twice, lest he should die, because it was too holy for him to go in twice. But today, since Christ has come, since he was born and lived and died and resurrected from the dead, something even greater in holiness has come. This is the body and the blood of Christ. This is the holiest thing that will ever be. So if this man in the Old Testament that we read about, who saw the tabernacle falling and he ran in to try to stop it, and the angels stopped it, but he, because he dared enter the holies of holies, dropped dead because he wasn't supposed to enter, because it was too holy to approach. How do you imagine that this woman today, wearing pants and carrying what she's calling the body and the blood of Christ, is possible to walk the streets of Chicago with God in her pocket? Do you realize that this is impossible to be the body of Christ? This cannot be the body of Christ. And if it's not the body of Christ, then the church that's calling itself Catholic is not Catholic. It's not the church. The Orthodox Church is the church. And there's no way in hell she has God in her pocket. And so she finally said, "I completely understand." And at that moment I said, "Mom, please come to the monastery." See where I'm at. And when you see it, you will know that this is the true Catholic and Apostolic Church. And she said, I will. And she did. And in coming to Jordanville, many miraculous events occurred to her that she strongly believes God permitted so that she would understand that this indeed is the true and the holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. She converts. And in the moment of her conversion, where she finally said, yes, I will become baptized an Orthodox Christian, after her many faithful years as a Catholic, going to church every day of her life, I said, Mom, you're going to have to change your name. Her name was Carmen. You have to pick an Orthodox saint. What name will you take? She says, I will be baptized Justina. This is very significant because in the end of her life, she dies on St. Justin Day as a baptized Orthodox Christian. And I remember the day she died, my sister calls me from the dialysis office. She had died on the dialysis chair. Within the minute, she calls me and says, Mom has died. And I immediately looked on the calendar. And looking at the calendar, I saw it was St. Justin Day, St. Justin Martyr. And I said, oh my. And at that very moment, someone knocks on the door. And I realized, oh, it's the cable guy. And at that time, we had roommates who depended on the internet and cable. And they were coming to fix my cable. And I opened the door that very minute. And the guy says, hi, my name is Justin. I said, what's your name? He says, my name is Justin. I said, look at that Orthodox calendar on the wall. And he reads it and he says, oh, today's St. Justin Day. I said, yeah, today is St. Justin. That's your patron saint. That was my mother's patron saint. And she dies today. And the minute that she dies, you come knocking on the door to say, hi, my name is Justin. I don't think that's a coincidence. And so 40 days later, you have Father Michael at school at the cemetery where I'm visiting my mother to do the Trisagion. Father Michael says to Peter Gavas, who's buried there? And Peter says, that's Timothy's mother. Her name was Justina. She died on St. Justin Day. And he says, oh my. And he takes out his cross that he's wearing and he says, I have a Iolipsana, a relic of St. Justin in this cross. And at that very minute, he's standing over my mother's grave on the 40th day of her repose. Again, I don't think that was a coincidence. I remember one spiritual conversation or theological conversation with my mother early on in my life when my sisters decided they were going to become born-again Christian Protestants. And my mother said, what friendship is greater than God's friendship? What loyalty is greater than any loyalty that a person can give to one another than God's loyalty to His church and to His saints? These are the ones that He loves because they loved Him. Don't leave the saints, especially don't leave His Holy Mother. This is the foundation of what we believe in. The saints and the sacraments and the Holy Cross. These things are essential to a Christian. Don't abandon this for something that is empty. It meant something to me. It meant nothing to my sisters. And at that young age of 14, I began to search for the truth. And what I used as my tool of understanding where is the truth was to believe that God is absolute truth and that there can't be a mingling between falsehood and truth, but everything about God and His faith has to be total truth. And so I said, all I need to do is find a falsehood, and I know it's all false. Where there is total truth and only truth, there is the true Church of Christ. And so that's what I looked for, and in doing that, I discovered Orthodoxy and became an Orthodox Christian.